March 2015. The morning fog still clung to the red clay hills surrounding Millerville, Alabama, when three unmarked patrol vehicles pulled into the gravel driveway of 1247 Pine Ridge Road. Sheriff Detective Maria Rodriguez was pouring her second cup of coffee when the call came through dispatch at exactly 6:43 a.m. What began as a routine arrest warrant service transformed into the most significant breakthrough in the county's oldest unsolved murder case. After 51 years of silence, the truth about what happened to 17-year-old Sarah Elizabeth Montgomery on November 23, 1964, was finally coming to light. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more details that mainstream coverage always leaves out. You won't believe what we uncover next. Sarah Elizabeth Montgomery entered this world on April 12, 1947, in the small rural community of Millerville, population 3,247. Standing 5 feet 4 inches tall with distinctive auburn hair that caught sunlight like copper wire, Sarah possessed bright green eyes that her mother, Dorothy Mae Montgomery, often described as windows to pure joy. Her father, Robert James Montgomery, worked as a shift supervisor at the local textile mill, earning $43 weekly to support his family. Sarah shared her childhood home on Elm Street with two younger brothers, Michael, age 14, and Timothy, age 11, in November 1964. Sarah had this infectious laugh that could fill our entire house, Dorothy recalled in a 1987 interview. She never met a stranger and always saw the good in everyone, even when maybe she shouldn't have. Friends consistently described Sarah as genuinely kind-hearted, always volunteering to help elderly neighbors with grocery shopping or babysitting younger children in the community without accepting payment. Her dreams centered on becoming a registered nurse, inspired by her volunteer work at Millerville General Hospital every Saturday morning. Sarah maintained a 3.8 grade point average at Millerville High School while working part-time at Henderson's Five and Dime store on weekends to save money for nursing school tuition. During the weeks leading up to her death, Sarah followed a predictable routine: school from 8 a.m. to 3:15 p.m., homework at the public library until 5 p.m., then helping her mother prepare dinner for the family. The socio-economic landscape of rural Alabama in 1964 reflected a community still deeply rooted in traditional Southern values and racial segregation. Millerville's economy depended primarily on agriculture and the single textile manufacturing plant that employed over 800 residents. Most families, including the Montgomerys, lived modestly but comfortably, with strong neighborhood bonds and everyone knowing their neighbor's business. The town center consisted of Main Street stretching 6 blocks, featuring Henderson's Five and Dime, Murphy's Grocery Store, First Baptist Church, Millerville Methodist Church, the post office, and Rayburn's Diner, where teenagers gathered after school for Coca-Cola and conversation. Racial tensions simmered beneath the surface, with the African American community living primarily in the quarters section across the railroad tracks, while white families occupied the residential areas closer to downtown and the mill. Social activities revolved around high school football games on Friday nights, church services on Sundays, and community gatherings at the American Legion Hall for special occasions. Young people had limited entertainment options, often gathering at the Sonic Drive-In on Highway 231 or attending movies at the single-screen Palace Theater downtown. This tight-knit environment meant that when tragedy struck the Montgomery family, the entire community felt the impact deeply. November 23, 1964, began like any other Monday for Sarah Montgomery. The timeline of her final day, reconstructed through witness testimony and official records, reveals a heartbreakingly normal sequence of events. 6:30 a.m. Sarah woke up and helped her mother prepare breakfast for the family, wearing her favorite blue dress with white collar trim. Her brother Michael later testified that she seemed particularly cheerful, humming while setting the table. 7:45 a.m. Sarah walked the 8 blocks to Millerville High School alongside her best friend, Janet Sue Williams, discussing plans for the upcoming Thanksgiving holiday. She was excited about helping cook the turkey, Janet recalled. Sarah loved family traditions. 8 a.m. First period English class with Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell, where students discussed their assigned reading of To Kill a Mockingbird. Several classmates remembered Sarah's passionate participation in the discussion about justice and moral courage. 12:15 p.m. Lunch period in the school cafeteria, where Sarah sat with her usual group of friends, sharing homemade chocolate chip cookies her mother had packed. 3:15 p.m. School dismissal. Sarah stopped at her locker, gathering books for homework assignments. 3:30 p.m. Last confirmed sighting by multiple witnesses. Sarah walked past Miller's hardware store on Main Street, heading toward the public library as was her custom. 4:45 p.m. Library closing time. Head librarian Mrs. Ruth Patterson testified that Sarah never arrived at the library that afternoon, breaking her consistent routine. 6 p.m. Dorothy Montgomery began worrying when Sarah failed to return home for dinner, something that had never happened before. 7:30 p.m. Robert Montgomery contacted Sheriff's Deputy Wayne Collins to report his daughter missing. The discovery came at dawn on November 25, 1964, when local farmer Henry Caldwell was checking his cattle in a remote pasture 3 miles southeast of town. Sarah's body lay partially concealed beneath a fallen oak tree near Willow Creek, approximately 200 yards from the nearest road access. The crime scene revealed several crucial pieces of evidence that would remain significant 51 years later. Investigators found Sarah's school books scattered in a line leading from the dirt road toward the creek, suggesting she had been forced to walk into the wooded area. Her blue dress was torn but remained largely intact, and her shoes were found separately, one near the body and another approximately 30 feet away. Physical evidence collected included tire tracks in the soft earth near the road, photographed but not preserved using proper chain of custody procedures typical of that era. A distinctive button, pearl-colored with 4 holes, was recovered 15 feet from the body, apparently torn from an unknown garment during the struggle. Investigators also found a partial footprint in the mud near the creek bank, larger than Sarah's shoe size and belonging to someone wearing work boots. "I've been doing this job for 12 years, and I've never seen anything like it," Deputy Collins told the Millerville Tribune. This was someone who knew her, someone she trusted enough to get in a vehicle with. Sarah wasn't the type to accept rides from strangers. The community's reaction was immediate and intense. Within hours of the discovery, more than 300 residents gathered at the crime scene before being dispersed by law enforcement. Local churches organized prayer vigils, and parents began escorting their children everywhere, afraid to let them walk alone even in broad daylight. Where are you watching this from tonight? Unfortunately, cases like Sarah's could happen anywhere, in any small town. Let us know in the comments below. The Millerville Sheriff's Department in 1964 consisted of Sheriff Thomas Rayburn, 2 full-time deputies, and 1 part-time officer covering the entire county. Limited resources and lack of advanced forensic capabilities significantly hampered the investigation from the beginning. The department had no crime scene photographer, no fingerprint analysis equipment, and no standardized evidence storage procedures. Despite these limitations, investigators identified 5 primary suspects within the first 2 weeks, each with apparent connections to Sarah and potential motives. Charles Edward, Eddie Morrison, age 24, mechanic at Rayburn's garage. Morrison had repeatedly asked Sarah on dates despite her consistent refusals, and several witnesses reported seeing him driving slowly past her house multiple times during the weeks before her death. Investigators discovered that Morrison had no verifiable alibi for November 23 afternoon, claiming he was working alone in the garage bay. However, his boss confirmed Morrison was scheduled to work that day, and no evidence directly linked him to the crime scene. James Robert Henley, age 19, recent high school graduate working at the textile mill. Henley had briefly dated Sarah during their junior year before she ended the relationship, and coworkers reported he often spoke bitterly about her rejection. On November 23, Henley claimed he was at work during the afternoon shift, but time clock records showed he had clocked out early at 2:30 p.m., giving him opportunity during Sarah's disappearance window. Mill security guard Walter Hayes confirmed Henley's departure time, but investigators found no physical evidence connecting him to the crime. David Lee Patterson, age 26, married father of 2 working as a delivery driver for Murphy's grocery store. Patterson's delivery route included the area near where Sarah's body was discovered, and store records showed he made deliveries in that vicinity on November 23. Several people noted Patterson's unusual interest in the investigation, frequently asking detailed questions about evidence and witness statements. His wife provided an alibi stating he returned home by 5 p.m. on November 23, but investigators questioned the reliability of spousal testimony. Marcus Anthony Rodriguez, age 22, part-time handyman and full-time farm worker for various local families. Rodriguez had performed yard work for the Montgomery family on 3 occasions during fall 1964, giving him familiarity with Sarah's routine and schedule. Neighbors reported seeing Rodriguez's distinctive blue pickup truck in the area where Sarah was last seen, but Rodriguez claimed he was working at the Henderson farm, 5 miles in the opposite direction. Farm owner Carl Henderson initially supported this alibi but later admitted he wasn't certain about the specific date and time. William Eugene Gene Thompson, age 31, married insurance salesman and active member of First Baptist Church. Thompson interacted with Sarah through church activities and had offered her rides home from evening services on several occasions. Church members noted Thompson's particular attention to teenage girls, though nothing overtly inappropriate had been documented. Thompson's wife confirmed he was home by 6 p.m. on November 23, but investigators noted a 2-hour gap in his whereabouts that afternoon. Each suspect was questioned multiple times, but without advanced forensic analysis or physical evidence directly linking any individual to the crime, the investigation gradually stalled. The tire tracks proved too degraded for useful comparison. Fingerprint evidence was minimal due to weather exposure, and witness testimonies often contained inconsistencies that developed over time. By spring 1965, active investigation efforts had significantly decreased. Sheriff Rayburn faced pressure to focus resources on other pressing cases, including a series of commercial break-ins and an increase in domestic violence calls. The last significant investigative activity occurred in August 1965, when the Alabama Bureau of Investigation briefly reviewed the case file but concluded that no new leads warranted further state-level involvement. Sarah's murder was officially classified as a cold case in September 1965, though the file remained technically open. The evidence box was stored in the basement of the old courthouse, where it would remain largely untouched for the next 4 decades. What time is it where you're watching? It's amazing how much time passed while this family waited for answers. The Montgomery family's grief manifested differently in each member, creating ripple effects that lasted generations. Dorothy Mae Montgomery transformed her devastating loss into fierce advocacy, becoming the unofficial spokesperson for crime victims' families throughout Alabama. She spent countless hours writing letters to law enforcement agencies, elected officials, and newspaper editors, demanding better resources for cold case investigations. "I made a promise to Sarah the day we buried her," Dorothy said in a 1978 interview. "I promised I would never stop fighting for the truth, never stop saying her name, never let people forget what happened to my beautiful girl." Dorothy established an annual memorial scholarship at Millerville High School for students pursuing nursing careers, ensuring Sarah's dream lived on through others. Robert Montgomery channeled his grief into protective vigilance, becoming an unofficial neighborhood watchman who walked the streets every evening until his death in 1983. Neighbors recalled seeing Robert's flashlight beam moving through backyards and alleys as he checked on families, particularly those with teenage daughters. He couldn't save Sarah, but he was determined to keep other children safe. Longtime neighbor Mrs. Betty Morrison remembered, "Michael Montgomery, 14 when his sister died, struggled academically and socially throughout the remainder of his high school years. The trauma of losing Sarah combined with watching his parents consuming grief led Michael to leave Millerville immediately after graduation, moving to Birmingham where he worked in construction for 37 years. Michael rarely discussed his sister's case publicly, but he quietly funded several private investigators over the decades, hoping fresh eyes might discover overlooked clues. Timothy Montgomery, the youngest at 11, perhaps suffered the most lasting psychological impact. He developed severe anxiety about separation from family members and required counseling throughout his teenage years. Timothy eventually became a social worker specializing in trauma counseling for children, directly inspired by his own experience navigating grief without adequate support. "Sarah's death taught me that children need someone who understands that their world can change forever in a single moment," Timothy reflected in a 2010 interview. The extended family also bore significant emotional burdens. Sarah's maternal grandmother, Clara Jenkins, died just 6 months after Sarah's murder, with family members attributing her death to a broken heart. Several cousins reported experiencing survivor's guilt, wondering why Sarah had been targeted instead of them. Family gatherings became increasingly somber affairs, with Sarah's empty chair serving as a constant reminder of their collective loss. The case underwent formal review 3 times during the following decades, each time incorporating new technological capabilities and investigative approaches available at the time. In 1978, the newly formed Alabama Cold Case Unit selected Sarah's murder for comprehensive review. Investigators re-interviewed surviving witnesses, applied improved fingerprint analysis techniques to preserved evidence, and consulted with FBI behavioral analysts to develop a psychological profile of the likely perpetrator. The review process took 8 months but ultimately concluded that insufficient evidence remained to pursue prosecution of any previously identified suspects. During 1991, advances in forensic science prompted another examination of physical evidence from Sarah's case. Hair and fiber samples were subjected to more sophisticated microscopic analysis, and investigators attempted to develop latent fingerprints using techniques unavailable in 1964. This review generated brief hope when analysts discovered previously undetected fibers on Sarah's dress that appeared to come from an unusual wool blend fabric. However, without comparison samples from suspects' clothing, the fibers provided no actionable leads. The third major review began in 2003, when DNA analysis became standard practice for cold cases. Unfortunately, the biological samples collected in 1964 had degraded significantly due to improper storage conditions in the courthouse basement. Crime scene technicians had used collection methods that contaminated much of the evidence, and the storage environment lacked climate control, causing further deterioration over nearly 4 decades. Each review cycle brought renewed media attention and community interest, temporarily raising the Montgomery family's hopes for resolution. However, the repeated disappointments took a cumulative emotional toll, with Dorothy Montgomery describing the reviews as picking at wounds that never properly healed. The physical landscape of Millerville underwent dramatic transformation during the decades following Sarah's murder. The textile mill closed permanently in 1987, eliminating the economic foundation that had sustained the community for generations. Population declined to fewer than 2,000 residents by 2000. And many of the downtown businesses shuttered permanently. The crime scene area near Willow Creek was eventually developed into a small residential subdivision called Magnolia Estates, with most residents unaware of the location's tragic history. The Montgomery family home on Elm Street was demolished in 1995 to make way for a convenience store parking lot, erasing another physical connection to Sarah's memory. Sarah's murder influenced local law enforcement policies significantly, leading to improved evidence collection training, better crime scene documentation procedures, and the establishment of victim advocacy services. The case became a teaching tool used in regional law enforcement training programs, demonstrating the importance of proper evidence preservation and thorough initial investigations. How's the weather where you are tonight? It's strange how seasons change while some families remain frozen in time. The breakthrough finally came on March 15, 2015. When Detective Rodriguez received a call from the Alabama Department of Forensic Sciences. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a forensic genealogist, had successfully extracted usable DNA from a small bloodstain on Sarah's dress that previous analysts had overlooked. Using advanced genetic sequencing technology developed for ancient DNA analysis, Dr. Walsh's team managed to develop a partial profile suitable for comparison. The DNA sample was entered into the Combined DNA Index System, CODIS, the national database containing genetic profiles from convicted offenders and unsolved crimes. Within 72 hours, the system generated a potential match with a sample collected during the 2008 domestic violence arrest in neighboring Crenshaw County. Detective Rodriguez immediately contacted the Crenshaw County Sheriff's Office to obtain details about the matching sample. The profile belonged to Gene William Thompson, now age 82, the same Gene Thompson who had been questioned as a suspect in 1964 but never eliminated from consideration. Modern forensic DNA analysis represents a revolutionary advancement over investigative techniques available in 1964. Dr. Walsh explained the process. We can now extract genetic material from samples so small they're invisible to the naked eye. The polymerase chain reaction allows us to amplify tiny amounts of DNA into quantities sufficient for analysis, and computerized comparison systems can match profiles against millions of samples in minutes. The technique used on Sarah's dress required extracting DNA from degraded cells using specialized enzymes, then amplifying specific genetic markers using thermal cycling procedures. Think of it like making millions of copies of a single page from a damaged book, Dr. Walsh described in accessible terms. Even if most of the book is destroyed, we can still read that one page clearly. Statistical analysis indicated the probability of the DNA belonging to someone other than Thompson was approximately 1 in 847 million, providing overwhelming scientific evidence of his presence at the crime scene. This level of certainty far exceeded the standards required for criminal prosecution and represented definitive proof of Thompson's involvement in Sarah's murder. The DNA match revealed that Gene Thompson, the respected insurance salesman and church member, had maintained contact with Sarah's blood on his clothing during the commission of her murder. Thompson had successfully concealed his guilt for 51 years while living as an apparently upstanding community member. Further investigation revealed that Thompson had lived in Millerville from 1962 through 1967, working for Mutual Life Insurance Company and maintaining active membership at First Baptist Church during the period of Sarah's murder. After 1967, Thompson moved to Montgomery, Alabama, where he continued his insurance career and eventually opened his own agency. He remarried in 1971 after his first wife died in a car accident, and raised 3 stepchildren who knew nothing about his criminal past. Make sure to hit that like button if you're finding this as incredible as we are. The revelations about Thompson's secret life will shock you. Thompson's post-crime life revealed a disturbing pattern of deception and calculated manipulation. Public records showed he had received numerous community service awards, including recognition from the Montgomery Chamber of Commerce for volunteer work with youth programs. Thompson served as a Little League baseball coach for 12 seasons, organized charity drives for local homeless shelters, and maintained perfect attendance at Riverdale Methodist Church for over 20 years. Most disturbingly, Thompson had returned to Millerville on multiple occasions during the 1970s and 1980s, ostensibly for business purposes but actually to monitor the investigation's progress. Former Sheriff's Deputy Wayne Collins, who had remained with the department until retirement in 1992, recalled Thompson visiting the sheriff's office in 1975 and again in 1982, claiming he wanted to provide additional information about Sarah's case. He presented himself as a concerned citizen who felt guilty about not doing more to help catch Sarah's killer, Collins remembered. Thompson asked detailed questions about evidence and whether we had any new leads. Now I realize he was checking to see if we were getting close to the truth. Thompson had also attended Sarah's funeral in 1964, signing the guest registry and expressing condolences to the Montgomery family. Dorothy Montgomery kept that guest book for decades, never realizing it contained the signature of her daughter's murderer. In a particularly cruel twist, Thompson had contributed $25 to Sarah's Memorial Scholarship Fund in 1978, presenting the donation during a public ceremony at Millerville High School. Psychological evaluation conducted by Dr. Marcus Rivera, a forensic psychiatrist with the Alabama Department of Mental Health, concluded that Thompson exhibited classic characteristics of an organized psychopath. Thompson demonstrated remarkable ability to compartmentalize his criminal behavior while maintaining a completely normal public persona, Dr. Rivera explained. This type of individual can commit horrific acts while simultaneously functioning as a respected community member, spouse, and parent. Dr. Rivera noted that Thompson's involvement in youth activities and his pattern of returning to monitor the investigation suggested he derived psychological satisfaction from his ability to deceive law enforcement and the community. The power and control aspect of literally getting away with murder can become intoxicating for certain personality types, Dr. Rivera observed. Thompson's behavior indicates he was reliving his crime through continued contact with the investigation and the victim's community. The arrest occurred at 6:47 a.m. on March 18, 2015, at Thompson's residence at 2847 Fairview Drive in Montgomery. Detective Rodriguez led a team of 4 officers in executing the warrant, finding Thompson in his kitchen preparing coffee while wearing a blue bathrobe and reading glasses. When informed he was under arrest for Sarah Montgomery's murder, Thompson's first words were reportedly, "I wondered when you'd finally figure it out." Thompson showed no visible emotion during the arrest process, calmly requesting permission to change clothes and call his wife before being transported to the Montgomery County Jail. During the search of his residence, investigators discovered a wooden box hidden in the basement containing newspaper clippings about Sarah's case, including articles from the 1978 and 1991 review periods. The box also contained a high school yearbook from Millerville High School's class of 1965, with Sarah's photograph circled in red ink. News of Thompson's arrest spread rapidly through both Millerville and Montgomery communities, generating shock and disbelief among people who had known him for decades. "Gene was the kind of person you'd trust with your children," said longtime Montgomery neighbor Patricia Williams. "He helped organize our neighborhood watch program and always volunteered for church cleanup days. This just shows you never really know someone." Thompson's wife of 44 years, Margaret Thompson, released a statement through her attorney expressing complete surprise at the charges and stating she had never suspected her husband's involvement in any criminal activity. "The man they're describing is not the man I've been married to all these years," her statement read. "Gene has been a loving husband and devoted grandfather who never showed any signs of violence or dishonesty." The community response revealed deep divisions between those who accepted the DNA evidence and others who refused to believe Thompson could be guilty. Several church members organized a legal defense fund, while others demanded his immediate expulsion from the congregation. The Riverdale Methodist Church pastor, Reverend Daniel Hayes, struggled to address his congregation's conflicting emotions about Thompson's double life. "What are your theories about how he managed to hide this for so long? Share your thoughts in the comments." Thompson's trial began on October 12, 2015, in Montgomery County Circuit Court, with Judge Patricia Morrison presiding. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Robert Chen, presented overwhelming DNA evidence linking Thompson to Sarah's murder, supported by testimony from forensic experts, law enforcement officers, and members of the Montgomery family who had survived the 5 decades since the crime. Dr. Jennifer Walsh testified extensively about the DNA analysis process, explaining to the jury how genetic material from Thompson's 2008 arrest sample matched the blood evidence from Sarah's dress with statistical certainty beyond reasonable doubt. The prosecution also presented evidence of Thompson's suspicious behavior following the murder, including his visits to the sheriff's office and his attendance at Sarah's funeral. Thompson's defense attorney, Martin Rodriguez, argued that the DNA evidence could have been contaminated during the 51 years since the crime, and suggested that Thompson's interest in the case stemmed from genuine concern rather than guilt. However, the defense struggled to explain how Thompson's blood could have appeared on Sarah's dress through innocent means. The most emotional testimony came from Timothy Montgomery, now 58 years old and the sole surviving immediate family member. "Sarah would have been 68 this year," Timothy told the jury through tears. "She would have been a grandmother, probably retired from her nursing career, maybe volunteering at the hospital like she did as a teenager. Gene Thompson stole all of that from her, and from our family." Thompson maintained his innocence throughout the trial, showing little emotion as witness after witness described the devastating impact of Sarah's murder. On November 6, 2015, after deliberating for just 2 hours and 17 minutes, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on charges of first-degree murder and kidnapping. Judge Morrison sentenced Thompson to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, noting his advanced age made the death penalty inappropriate. "Mr. Thompson, you have lived 51 years of freedom that Sarah Montgomery was denied," Judge Morrison stated during sentencing. "While this court cannot restore those lost decades to the victim or her family, we can ensure that justice is finally served." Sarah Montgomery's case fundamentally changed cold case investigation protocols throughout Alabama and influenced national standards for evidence preservation and DNA analysis. The Alabama Cold Case Unit now requires annual review of all unsolved murders, and evidence storage facilities have been upgraded to maintain proper environmental conditions for long-term preservation. Timothy Montgomery established the Sarah Elizabeth Montgomery Foundation in 2016. Providing funding for forensic technology improvements in rural law enforcement agencies. The foundation has equipped 12 sheriff's departments with updated evidence storage systems and DNA collection kits, potentially preventing future cases from suffering the same evidentiary degradation that nearly prevented Sarah's case from being solved. Dorothy Montgomery passed away in 2003, 12 years before her daughter's killer was brought to justice, but she lived to see significant improvements in victim advocacy services and cold case investigation techniques that her persistent advocacy helped create. The scholarship fund she established has provided educational assistance to 47 nursing students, ensuring that Sarah's dream of helping others continues to impact new generations. The case has become a teaching tool used in forensic science programs nationwide, demonstrating both the importance of proper evidence collection and the revolutionary potential of advancing DNA technology. Law enforcement agencies regularly cite Sarah's case when requesting funding for evidence storage improvements and forensic training programs. Make sure you're subscribed to our channel for more in-depth coverage of cold cases that mainstream media doesn't fully explore. We have several similar cases coming up that show how modern science is finally bringing justice to families who waited decades for answers. Share this video with others who appreciate the importance of never giving up on finding the truth, and let us know in the comments what other unsolved cases you'd like us to investigate. Justice may be delayed, but it doesn't have to be denied forever.